Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily. Glad to be here with you on a Tuesday, the Tuesday of All-Star Week, the Tuesday of the All-Star Game, following the Home Run Derby last night in Major League Baseball. Boy, and that's about it this time of year as far as, like, games happening. I flip open. I love to use the CBS Sports app. Flip it open, see a bunch of soccer scores right there front and center, and I'm out. Nope, sorry. We're going to find something else to do today. But we are getting some news as we do this time of year, you know, sort of counting down the clock to the TBT here in Wichita, counting down the clock to training camp, the trade deadline in Major League Baseball, the NBA Summer League is in action. There's plenty happening always on the sports calendar. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing for you. Glad to be here with you on KFH over the air, 97.5 here on FM, on the Odyssey app if you're streaming us, and on video via Facebook, via YouTube, via Twitter. Lots of ways to get in touch with the program. You can leave your comments there. You can tweet at us. We can get to that. The IHOP hotline is open, 869-1240. Tommy, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. You know, you ran through all the different things that, we're kind of anticipating training camp and the trade deadline and different things like that. Also, some coaching news that I know we talked to Bob Huggins yesterday, but that saga continues. Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. That's a big story. So there are some headlines that I know we want to get into today.
Yeah, it's some unfortunate headlines, unfortunately, with Bob Huggins and Pat Fitzgerald. But that's sort of where we stand right now with two massive presences in their industries. Pat Fitzgerald, as hot a name as there, was at one point there at Northwestern, getting NFL looks, but at his alma mater, he stayed, just signed a 10-year extension, a year ago, now fired. We'll get into that. Bob Huggins continues a back and forth with West Virginia, resigned, then says he didn't resign. And it's gotten more confusing, and he's doubling down a little bit. So we'll get into those as we make our way through the program. 869-1240 is the number to call. We also will get into, and let's start with some more positive news, Tommy, because it was a long night. My kids were up all night, just trying to get the caffeine flowing here. So let's start on a good note. The Home Run Derby. How much did you tune in? I love the Derby. I contend that it is the best thing of any, sports all-star showcase, or, between the Pro Bowl and the NBA. I suppose you could compare the slam dunk contest, but I think even more than the game itself now, the Home Run Derby has become the premier exhibition in sports. I love it. I think people generally gravitate to it. There's as much drama in it as anything. Julio Rodriguez makes history in front of the home crowd last night with 42 home runs in a round, and they change the rules all the time, but it was as good a display as we've ever seen. But he didn't win, right? Vladimir Guerrero Jr. wins and completes the father-son dynasty there over the dark horse Randy Arozarena, who plowed through that thing. My money was on Adolis Garcia and Julio Rodriguez, so I didn't win any money last night, but I felt pretty good about J-Rod until you get through historically, Tommy, in the tournament, when you have those sorts of rounds, like it doesn't sustain because you just kind of go all in on that round. But I thought it was good. I thought it was a really good derby that, and kind of came down to the wire there between Vladdy Jr. and Arozarena. I'll tell you this, I don't like, well, I do and I don't. The distance thing they did to give the extra time is cool because we all like to see the moonshots. But that is unfair to the guys who hit home runs, but aren't just those, superhumans that hit them 1 billion feet. But, it was a nice idea. I thought it was good. I was entertained. And nice job, Major League Baseball.
I've always had an issue with the structure of the home run derby once they moved to the bracket way that they do it. Because, you watch somebody like Julio Rodriguez in front of his home crowd, and, he's not competing in the finals after a record-setting, what was that, second round? And then you had like Adley Rutschman, who was hitting bombs in the first round from both sides of the plate. And that was a fun story to watch too. And then he didn't move on either. And so the crowd didn't get a chance to watch him do that throughout the night. So I've always been a big proponent of whoever hits the most home runs moves on to the next round, not necessarily, the 1 seed defeating the 8 seed and 2 and 7 and so on and so forth. I just want to see in one round, you maybe take the top 4 guys or whatever that hit the most home runs, you move them on, and then you go from there. The seeding, the bracket, I think they try to get too cute with it, and it ends up robbing the fans of, really, and how cool would it have been for Julio Rodriguez to be in the finals at his home stadium in Seattle after a record-setting second round. He didn't get a chance to do that just because of the way that the bracket played out.
It's semantics here discussing which format is the best, because there's a part of me that actually likes the idea of, not a timer, but outs, right? You have 10 outs and get as many as you can. I think that I actually like that better than the timed competition. And then maybe, you incorporate the bonus ball thing. I think I like that. When the brackets first started, I didn't like them at all because sometimes you'd have the second best performer lose in the first round.
Right.
I think if you do the bracket, which is okay, maybe leave like a wild card spot for somebody to move into that second round if they didn't win, or maybe the next best non-bracket winner, right? That would have helped Salvador Perez the other year as we relate it back home here to locally, because he was fantastic in that derby. Like the second, like he was incredible, but Alonso just had that first round. So then you do that, and then I think, Tommy, you're right. Then at that point, after that first bracketed round, throw the brackets out and just have everybody compete against each other. Because then you'd go from 8 to 4, right?
Yep.
And then just have those 4 in a free for all at that point. And maybe at that point you
have it go to 1. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe at that point you go, right? You go, a timed first round and then a 10 out second round. They're constantly tweaking it. I don't have a problem with that. It's not something where I'm like outraged when, the format. I didn't like that Salvi didn't get through because he had such a nice round, but that was nothing but more than nostalgia. Like it was this moment where you were like, this is the chance for Major League Baseball to appreciate Salvi on a national scale, this great character of the game. And it was sort of robbed from him. That was annoying, but it wasn't like I was like, oh, God, this is so unfair. It was just like, I really wish everybody would have got to see more of Salvi. I love it, though. I think the Derby, I remember as a kid, man, ESPN used to run like these classic, before they had all this programming, they would always run like derbies from a long time ago. And I don't know, like it would be like these one-on-one exhibitions or something. I remember as a kid, they would have those on and it would be like a blast to the past or something to that effect. And I thought those were so cool. And then ESPN did a nice job on 30 years of Griffey really transforming the home run derby, which he totally did, right? Like Ken Griffey Jr. made this thing what it is. He started it. And then we've had those singular performances in the derby that just, you remember the year Josh Hamilton, I think it was at Yankee Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was just,
that was incredible.
Like, absolute bombs that year. Like you find those things. And it's not every year that you get that sort of special storyline. This year obviously had it with Vladdy Jr. and Vlad Sr. both winning. That was really cool. But almost always something really spectacular happens in the Derby. How about Adley Rutschman in the first round? Like,
Yeah.
whoa,
From both sides of the plate. That was pretty cool.
Back to the conversation yesterday about drafting college catchers, right? Like, whoa, look at this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I love the Derby. I think it has surpassed the All-Star game for me. It hasn't always been that way. Like, I used to lock in and watch every second of the All-Star game. I don't find myself doing that anymore as much. I probably will tune in a whole lot more this year because there are 5 Rangers in the starting lineup, as I'm celebrating today with my Rangers shirt. But for whatever, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's back to not. And I didn't like the home field advantage thing.
Yeah.
Although I will say it made me watch it. I mean, I
Sure.
definitely was more locked in when it was there. I get it. It's not fair. I mean, I
didn't like it either because you've got, players from teams that are completely out of contention that are helping or hurting. Teams contribute to a home field advantage in the playoffs. So I didn't like that logic, but you're right. It absolutely made me lock in. You mentioned 5 Rangers. I'll see your 5 Rangers and raise you 8 Braves on the National League roster. So I'll probably be locked into it a little bit more this year because of that also. But I like the home run derby. To me, the classic days you were talking about watching classic derbies. For me, the classic days of Chris Berman, calling the home run derby and
I thought about
and all
him
of that
last night because
like
I think
that was
Ravitch
it was a blast.
and is it Perez? I
Eduardo
think
Perez, yeah.
they do a really good job. There's more
do.
education in it
But
now
you
with Perez.
You can't beat the back.
I know.
I mean, you
I know.
can't beat that.
That annoyed a lot of people. I'm with you. I love
Yeah.
the back. I wish they would bring him back for like one batter just for fun each
Remember,
year.
was it last year or 2 years ago? They brought him back briefly to do something, and if memory serves, he didn't know the names of the current players. Like he had been so disconnected from that world for a while, and it was almost like I think that it might have been Ravitch or somebody asked him who he liked to win or something, and he couldn't name any names, outside of like a couple guys that are like superstars. So I think that there's probably a reason why they let Boomer kind of ride off into the sunset a little bit there. But I just thinking back to King Griffey Jr. with the backwards hat and Chris Berman calling the derby. And, you mentioned the year of Josh Hamilton, and just there have been some really iconic moments in the home run derby. And what I like about it so much is that it's so much more casual than the All-Star game is. So you've got players and their families and all of that out on the field, and they're all hanging around and they're having fun. And like that sort of exhibition and spectacle, I can get behind that. It's always fun to watch.
Yeah. It's look, Berman had a run unlike any other. And I don't know, I don't know who the most important person singularly to ESPN's rise and, staying power and pop culture status in the early to mid, because I'm a Dan Patrick guy. It was, for me, the best and the one that I liked the most, but it's probably Berman. With his nicknames and with, the Tom Jackson show, which I haven't tuned into that since they've gone to like ESPN Plus or whatever. But that was as good a show recapping highlights, I think, as there ever has been. But Berman with the Derby, a part of it, I think he definitely made the Derby better. And I do wish that because he would know Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He called seniors. Like that would have been cool to get him in for a round of Vladdy Juniors. But the other part of that too is, Tommy, there's a lot of people watching that don't even know who Chris Berman is at this point, like, which makes me feel really old, but it's reality.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that, Chris Berman, some of his shtick over the years, people find obnoxious, or some people do. And I do to an extent. Like if it's a serious kind of thing, I don't think Berman was ever the right guy to be in that kind of position. But for a spectacle like the home run derby, where it's fun and you've got the nicknames and you've got the back call and all of that, I'm totally on board. Like he was in his element in calling the home run derby. So, and yeah, I think that for guys like you and me, we're in our late 30s, we're approaching middle age. Chris Berman was around in our formative years of watching ESPN. I mean, he's kind of the voice of our generation in that regard.
Yeah. I mean,
One of them,
one
probably.
of them for sure. I'm trying to think back through that roster. Stuart Scott certainly had an impact on us. I mentioned Dan Patrick. He probably was just slightly ahead of us, but I still think like talk
you've got
radio.
Patrick, you've got Olbermann. I mean, those two guys were
I wasn't even
Sports Center together.
I didn't think Olbermann was that great. I mean, he was
Rich Eisen is probably there.
He was a great compliment to Dan Patrick. Scott Van Pelt now is as good as there is. I mean,
absolutely.
There's a reason ESPN. I mean, to be able to carry what he carries on a nightly basis now in the current sports world is insanely difficult to do because everybody already knows the outcomes of the games. It's interesting, but the home run derby is one of the things that helped put ESPN on the map. I mean, let's be real here. The NFL draft, the home run derby, like some of these things that they've owned and taken to the next level is as good a lesson in sports programming as we've seen. I mean, the ESPN does that with certain things really, really well. The home run derby is one of them. And look, I think it's better than the All-Star game. I love the All-Star game. I think the All-Star game is the best of the exhibition games. I just think I've found myself enjoying the Derby more.
Yeah, I'm not finding myself tuning into the Pro Bowl. I haven't watched the Pro Bowl in years. That the NBA All-Star game, I might keep an eye on, but I'm not really locking into it. Tonight, I'll watch and I'll make a point to sit down. And in fact, there have been years where I've invited like buddies over and we've watched the All-Star game and like barbecued, like that. We've done that a couple of times. So I'm with you. I'm 100% on board with you where it is the best, All-Star game, the best exhibition. I think some of that has to do with the fact that this week, what else is there to do? Like you mentioned, like seeing all the soccer scores and all of that. When the Pro Bowl happens, you've also got college basketball in the NBA that you can watch. The NBA All-Star game, there are other things going on. There's literally nothing. Like there's nothing going on this week. It's All-Star game or bust.
I think that's half the reason. And I think the other half is you can play it at its highest, most competitive level. You don't have to take anything off, which is also appealing. The NBA All-Star game, and I'm totally comfortable with it because I wouldn't want, the stars playing at their top level for risk of injury. Obviously, in football, that's the case. No offense to hockey, Jad, you could probably chime in. I don't watch the hockey exhibition, but I would imagine, again, with the physicality of the sport, that they're not playing that. Do they even play a game anymore, Jad, or do they just do the skills?
Yeah. No, they still play.
No, they play a game.
Yeah, but you can't do that at the at the peak competitive level. Baseball, I mean, you just play baseball, right? Like there's nothing you're going to do that's putting, I mean, I suppose there may be fewer stolen bases, right? Or maybe you don't dive for a ball or something. But you don't have to worry about that in baseball. And that's just baseball, just the way it's played. Like it's not a big deal, right? So that'll be tonight. Plenty to watch for. Nothing on the line. That's okay. Royals fans, well, it's coming. Now, at some point, Salvador Perez is in. He's always a reason to watch. I always love when he gets that platform because I do think he's one of the great characters in this game. We'll see if he remains a Royal the rest of the year. That will be an interesting thing to watch, but that is tonight. And, nice job, Home Run Derby. Thought it was a good one. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline's open. Nostalgia with the Derby. Anybody out there, you can let us know. We're going to have some giveaways throughout the show today. Let's do one of them. Let's do one of them now. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Boulevard Theaters here in Wichita, out at Town West. You can check it out a day early. Pair of tickets for a special screening on Thursday, a couple days from now, July 13th, 7 o'clock. If you want to get a sneak peek at that movie, you can do it right now. Be our first caller, 869-1240 to the IHOP hotline. Jad will hook you up with some tickets. We've got some Wind Surge tickets to give away later in the show. We'll give away some HTO tea and coffee, all kinds of good stuff here as we make our way through All-Star Week. It's Albracht and Castor at Sports Daily. Now to the bad news. Next, Huggins, Fitzgerald. What in the world? All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us here. Jim is our winner of the Mission Impossible tickets, wants to chime in as well on the Home Run Derby. Jim, congratulations. Welcome in on the IHOP hotline. How are you today?
No, not too bad. And really enjoying the conversations, that's for sure.
Well, thank you, Jim.
So I'm the same age as you guys. And, I remember, the late 90s watching, McGuire and Sosa and those guys, how big a deal it was to win the Home Run Derby. Remember Sosa, like, literally putting splash in his face in between each round and everything like that. I'm curious, though, do you enjoy the new format versus the old format? Like in those days, when you actually could enjoy the power of those guys, whether it was tainted or not. Don't want to get into that debate, but, did you enjoy actually being able to watch guys hit 500-foot bombs and hearing guys like Berman just go, wow, when it, would hit the scoreboard in Colorado, or now where you really can't, guys are literally just whacking as fast as they can.
It's a part of the reason when we were talking about that I do like the outs format. It does allow for the majesty of some of the bombs. And honestly, like, I would be fine if they I don't want to say like juiced the baseball, but like if they whatever it is with like humidors and whatever, if they did something to help those balls fly a little further, like, and you just, like, you can be honest about that. Like, these are not regulation balls, whatever. I don't know if people would be into that or not, but yeah, I do miss the 500-foot moonshots, but I don't miss the steroid era. So I don't know, I don't know how you can get back to that. Griffey's never really been tied to any of that. And he did set the precedent when he hit it off the warehouse there in Baltimore. So you could still get there. But yeah, I think if guys weren't taking as many hacks as they could, maybe they could put a little more, behind one of those. So I think both would be okay. Like, you have two different ways to do it. You have sort of a lightning round that's timed, and then you go by outs. I think if you could do the timed round to start it, because that just takes an obscene amount of stamina. But then you go to the outs in the next, once it gets down to 4, I would be totally down with that. And I think I would advocate for it as we've had the discussion here today.
Yeah, there's really kind of there's a franticness about the Home Run Derby now where, and I know that viewing habits have changed and the way that people watch TV has changed. And I'm sure that in ESPN's mind, they're thinking we got to keep the energy going throughout the entire thing, and not have any letdowns or whatever. But then you go back to 20 years ago, and I didn't think there was really ever a letdown. You could kind of take a breath in between home runs, but there's so much happening. And I don't know if, like, really, if a lot of people don't like this. I certainly have watched this over the last couple of years when ESPN's done it, but they've got that split screen. So you've got like the actual home run derby going on one screen, and then other conversations about other things happening on the other side. It makes it really hard to keep up with exactly what's happening, and you can't focus in, on just the home runs itself. So, Jim, I think to your point, there's something about, it's not even necessarily for me about the steroid era and these guys hitting big bombs. It's more about just being able to sit back, relax, and enjoy every home run, as opposed to it being just, super frantic the entire time.
I like I think the idea of the initial round doing the speed round, but now there were times I think Sosa, McGuire, you sit there and you take 4 or 5 pitches in between to get that perfect pitch. I think, it could drag on, but I think if you put if a guy hits a home run, okay, you can see one more pitch, but you're swinging at the next pitch type thing. You could enjoy the home runs more than you can now. But, just being an old school guy, you knew going in, you was going to sit there for 3 hours, but you got to watch the absolute just bombs that those guys hit. But appreciate it, guys, and look forward to listening to you guys discuss that.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And congratulations on the Mission Impossible movie tickets. Yeah,
Hey, by the way, how disappointing or how depressing, I guess, is it that we're in the old school now? Like we're reminiscing, like nostalgia about the way that it used to be back in our day. That's a
I'm
little
used
bit,
to
a
it
little bit of a
because
bummer.
I'm used to it because I work in the TV office with, all younger people. That was a weird transition. Go from the younger person in the, in the office to now one of the old heads. I use old heads, right? But it's not depressing anymore because I've sort of embraced it now. Now we can pull those rocking chairs out and tell everybody how it used to be better than it is now. That feel like that's sort of a rite of passage, right? Like nobody cares or listens to you, but it is, you just say it anyway, right?
Old man yells at clouds.
Yeah, that's right. And that's just fine with me. I'm okay with it. We lose our minds. You have kids, you lose your mind. I'm convinced of that. Like maybe we gain some of it back, or maybe it's just gone forever. And it doesn't matter. I've sort of embraced it. But yeah, I do love the new Derby though. Like I think it can always be better. And I appreciate the fact that they change it up and mix it up and try to perfect it. And now they've got all the people counting the home runs. That's a little weird that wasn't always the case, but whatever, we fixed it. So the betting aspect of it makes it a lot more intriguing, quite frankly. Yep. I think that's a really cool and fun way to take in the Derby, is to just bet a winner. We used to do pools, and everybody would draw a name out of a hat and, pitch in whatever, $5 and winner take all kind of a deal, which is sort of fun to do. But now betting winners is also fun. Vladdy was Vladdy the favorite? He was close to the favorite. But boy, Randy Arozarena wasn't. There were a lot of people that almost made probably a lot of money on Arozarena last night because he, I think, was the longest odds of the group. But it is a great day in baseball. Today is another great day in baseball. And then honestly, after today, it's like fever pitch to the trade deadline. And there are a whole lot of buyers at the deadline this year. And I think this is going to be a really interesting trade deadline. Not only are there buyers, I think there are desperate buyers, Tommy, that haven't been there in a while, that are going to be willing to get pretty aggressive at the deadline. So that will be fascinating to watch in the Major League Baseball calendar. Let's use the time here to take a little break so we have plenty of time to begin to discuss Pat Fitzgerald and Bob Huggins. We'll start with Fitzgerald. It just happened, and get you an update on Huggins as well as we make our way through. It's Sports Daily. It is a Tuesday. Jacob and Tommy will be right back. All right, welcome back in, everybody. It's Sports Daily, hour number 1 here on KFH. Glad to be with you. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. IHOP hotline's open, 869-1240. Tommy, let's hit the bad news. We've had some fun with the Home Run Derby. Happy to jump back there with you. But Pat Fitzgerald, we've got two coaches, two sort of legends in their industries in trouble now, and both not coaching the programs we've grown accustomed to them coaching for, for different reasons. Let's start with Fitzgerald. This happened yesterday. If you hadn't seen what was happening there has been an investigation into hazing allegations at the university for a little while. An investigation that, an independent investigation that didn't really turn anything up, not enough anyway, but the university, and you can go to the university newspaper where they did a little more in-depth reporting with some of the accusers after the fact that the university was just going to suspend Pat Fitzgerald for basically not having control over the program during all of this. And you can see a little more specifically, if you choose, some of the allegations about what was going on. Pretty intense hazing, stupid, dumb, idiotic act, if it's true, of like, scratch your head, like, why? Like, what in the world, and how, like, why or how does this happen? Like, I've been in locker rooms. I got 4 brothers. I get ribbing each other. I get messing with each other. I that's all fine and whatever, but there's this clear line that gets crossed all the time. And it just makes you wonder, like, who's signing off on this? Like, who's like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. So you can go look into that if you want. We don't need to discuss it here. Not even sure if it's radio appropriate. But sexual abuse allegations. So the university then does a little deeper dive, and the school president comes back and says, you know what? In light of everything, we're going to fire Pat Fitzgerald, which was a shocking development in this story, quite frankly, because Pat Fitzgerald probably has a pretty solid case here. Now, the university will I'm sure, say this is for cause, but man, when there's an independent investigation that doesn't show any direct involvement from Pat Fitzgerald, it's going to be tough. And he's already hired a high-profile attorney to fight this. He's in like year 2 of a 10-year contract at his alma mater. It's going to be a hot mess. It's so ridiculous that this even still happens. And I do give a lot of leniency to young people to be idiots, because we've all been there. We were all probably, most of us anyway, idiots when we were younger. But like, my goodness, what in the world is happening if this is true, that we even have to get to this point? And I don't necessarily feel bad for Pat Fitzgerald. He should have known what was going on if he didn't. But like, everything's out the window now for a guy that before, 48 hours ago was as respected a name in the industry as we have. Unreal.
Here's where I land on all of this with Fitzgerald, is that if he did know what was going on,
right,
and he had sanctioned it or had, approved it or turned a blind eye to it, but he knew what was going on, then absolutely, he deserves to be out as the head coach at Northwestern. On the other hand, if he didn't know what was going on in his program, then I'm not sure that he is capable of running a high-profile football program, because, you are the head coach and you are responsible for the culture of the program, and you should know what's going on inside your locker room. I know that you've got, a ton of guys in your program, and that's a lot of people to oversee, but you are in that locker room. You are around on a daily basis. You should know what goes on. And if you didn't know what's going on, then something's wrong there too. So either way, I'm not sure that I can find an area where I can have a lot of sympathy for Pat Fitzgerald. Either it was, him sanctioning something he shouldn't have and knew what was going on and just chose to ignore it, or he didn't know and he needed a better handle on his program. So either way, like, I get this. And I know that people are shocked. I know you're shocked when we talked about it yesterday. I don't know. I saw this coming a mile away. Like, when he was suspended for 2 weeks without pay, I'm like, really? Like, this is the off season where nothing is going on right now. So you're suspending him for 2 weeks without pay. All right, that's nothing more than a slap on the wrist.
I don't know. Was it 2 weeks in the season or 2 weeks
no,
right now?
2 weeks, like, right away. Like, he was placed on suspension.
Yeah, that wasn't enough.
2 weeks, like, that's not enough. And all that did was cause the collective, university supporters and all of that to be like, hey, there's something else going on here. Credit to the student journalists for uncovering this. Keep in mind, Northwestern is in the Chicago Metro, and you've got high profile media outlets that were not covering this, but the student newspaper did.
Let's be real. That is a very well-known and prestigious journalism university.
Yeah.
So that doesn't
Hats off to
surprise
them.
me.
You got
people
I didn't even know this until
school that are going into it like for the right reasons.
I didn't even know this until yesterday. And I don't know if this guy runs the program or if he's just a professor. Did you know J.A. Adonde, who was on ESPN for years and years, is a professor in the Northwestern journalism department? And he might run the entire department. Yeah, I didn't know
I believe that I did know that. He left, I think, like the LA Times to go there or something like that. I remember seeing that. Yeah, credit to them. Absolutely. And I'm not saying I feel bad for Pat Fitzgerald because he got fired for this. That's not what I'm saying. It just like, I can imagine a scenario like what I want to know about all this is how long was it happening? Was this one class of players that was doing this? Was it because that's a scenario where it's like you get a couple of bad seeds who create this culture for a year and it wipes away everything that you've worked hard for to do the right way and, be a good ambassador of young men, because that's possible. I don't know that part of it. I didn't gather that part of it, like the length of time that this was happening. It's the president's fault for such a lackluster punishment in the first place. And Pat Fitzgerald probably deserves blame there too, because I do believe that was a mutual decision. But yeah, 2 weeks with these sorts of accusations? No. And here's the other stupidity of it. Had the allegations been more public, had the university acknowledged exactly what was being accused, right, before the student newspaper, there's no chance they only say 2 weeks, right? The 2 week suspension came because nobody at that point knew what happened. The second everybody knows what happened, they're like, 2 weeks, what the hell?
Northwestern, like, they screwed the pooch on that initial punishment for Pat Fitzgerald. And had there been something that had a little bit more teeth on it at the beginning,
that's where
we might not be talking about Pat Fitzgerald.
That's why I'm saying I feel so, I it's not that I feel bad. That's the wrong terminology. I don't feel bad at all. Like, I don't care. It's that, like, had the university handled this better, Pat Fitzgerald might not be fired, right? And again, by all accounts, I don't think you wipe away all the good because of one thing that's been accused that, again, an independent panel found he didn't, this wasn't like his responsibility. But it happens all the time, Tommy. Like, what do you think is going to happen if you're Northwestern here? Like, if you're that president, like, what do you think is going to happen if you just say, like, this happens all the time too?
Yep.
Like, this isn't the first time we've seen this. Like, are you kidding me? You don't think, if those are the allegations, you don't think that's coming out somewhere? Like, that's so stupid and idiotic. And yeah, I agree with you. If they came out and said, look, this is heinous, I don't care what the independent panel says, that can't happen. And guess what? There's an old term, right? That stuff rolls downhill, so it starts at the top. And if that was happening, yeah, then it is ultimately Pat Fitzgerald's responsibility, whether he was directly involved or not. We're going to suspend him for half the season. He's out. We're going to suspend him for the whole season. He's got to be out this year. And I think at that point, people would have said, okay, That's appropriate. 2 weeks, especially like you said, if it's 2 weeks in the off season, that's almost insulting to the accusers, because nowhere in this, like, and again, I don't believe that in the independent investigation it was ever determined that this didn't happen, right? It was only determined that Pat Fitzgerald wasn't directly involved, but not that it didn't happen. So the second it happens, right, that deserves a year. Probably a year would have, I think, been more appropriate. That would have, been impactful enough to strike real change on something like this and drive sincere remorse. Now you've got a situation, because Pat Fitzgerald's not going to fight that, legally. He probably at that point regrets not, doing something, knowing about it, whatever, but it doesn't wipe away 20 years of a relationship at the university, essentially. This does. And he's going to fight this legally and probably win, by the way. And the university sits here now. They didn't do the right thing. In fact, they intentionally did the wrong thing. Then they come back after the fact and try and clean up the mess and do the right thing. Now they're going to get screwed out of a whole lot of money. Okay, like you made this bed, Northwestern. I have absolutely no sympathy for Northwestern, because again, stop screwing this up. It's not that complicated. Be honest and open with the public. I don't expect a university to know everything that's happening inside. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, I cannot believe Northwestern allowed this to happen. Like, no, they don't have total control over what happens in every situation. It's probably unrealistic to say Pat Fitzgerald does. Not totally. He should have certainly more than the university. But what is the university holding back for? They weren't very good last year. They're not going to be very good next year. Like, what do you think is going to be the fallout from suspending him for a year and doing the right thing instead of doing the wrong thing, getting called out for it, then doing the wrong thing again because you're going to lose a legal battle for it, and sit there with egg on your face and potentially, I mean, let's be real, Tommy, potentially screw the university for a long time because the football program's not any good.
The other thing that you mentioned that, I picked up on, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, is when you said this happens all the time. This is nothing new, whether it's, hazing or, I mean, there are countless examples in college athletics and even to an extent in the pros. Like I think back to like the Urban Meyer situation with the Jaguars, where there were hazing and abuse and like that sort of thing. That I mean, look at New Mexico State from this last year basketball, right? With Greg Heyer, the former Wichita State assistant under Greg Marshall. They shut that program down for the rest of the year and fired Heyer due to hazing allegations and things like that were going on within the program. What did Fitzgerald think was going to happen? Like, I go back to what I said before. You either need to have more 100%, you have to have a handle on your program. But if you know what's going on, you have to put a complete stop to it, because at some point or another, it's going to come out in the public. So get a handle on it, shut it down. If you don't know what's happening, then you need to have a better handle on your program to go and find out what's going on. So one way or another, I know Northwestern, they fumbled this basically from the beginning. I don't have any sympathy for Fitzgerald, though, either, because he should have known. And if he did know and he didn't shut it down, then that's even worse.
It's it is so unfortunate on about 1,000 different levels. And don't you just know? I mean, we'll talk about this in the second hour, like what the future looks like for Pat Fitzgerald and potentially Bob Huggins. We'll get you the latest on the Bob Huggins drama, too. It's really interesting to think about. We'll do it as we make our way into hour number 2, 869-1240. Let's give something else away here. Let's do some HTO. We'll do a couple of iced tea cards, Jad. So those are good for both the East and West locations, 13th and Tyler West, 21st and 127th East. More than 25 flavors of iced tea to choose from. If you haven't been in, or if you have, well, you'll get a few free ones on us. 2 free iced tea cards with HTO Wichita. To our first caller during the break here, 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline. We'll come right back. We'll get you the winner there, and we'll get into the Bob Huggins piece of a sad day in coaching. We'll be right back.
NFL Loud Mornings with Bob and Tom on 97.5 and 1240 KFH, Wichita's most listened to sports radio. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
Celebrate your birthday at Hook and Reel Cajun Seafood Restaurants. Enjoy a free birthday boil, including your choice of seafood and sauce with corn, potatoes, and cheesecake. Get the details and eat for free on your birthday at Hook and Reel at Townie Square, Kellogg, and Rock.
If you're hired, it can feel like you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. In fact, ZipRecruiter has helped a lot of business owners find their needle in a haystack, like Marco, president of operations at Telly Tires and Auto Centers. Because Telly Tires has grown a lot in the last few years, Marco needed to hire everyone from a receptionist to a store manager to a head mechanic.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs to fill. ZipRecruiter helps me keep my business running.
Take it from Marco and millions of other businesses who've used ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. That's ZipRecruiter.com/RADIO. ZipRecruiter.com/radio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Just go to 4hims.com/radio. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, a 100% online process, and trusted generic alternatives to the name brands to treat ED at up to 95% off. That's right, the same active ingredient as the brand name for 95% less. It's the same ED medication, still prescribed by a licensed medical provider, but with zero copay, no expensive appointments, and no awkward face-to-face conversations. To start your free online visit, you need to go to this exclusive address, 4hims.com/radio. That's 4hims.com/radio for your free online visit. FORHIMS.com/RADIO.
The KFH Studios, powered by Devon James Injury Lawyers. Call 888-8888. That's 888-8888.
I'm Taylor Bishotti with NFL Network Now on the Westwood One Radio Network. The past 2 seasons, the Bengals have gone 3-1 against the Chiefs, with the two sides splitting the past 2 AFC championships. This offseason, there's been banter back and forth between the teams, and Cincinnati quarterback Joe Burrow was asked about it. His reply was, quote, "The best thing about that is it's all settled on the field, so we'll see them in December." The Chiefs host the Bengals Week 17 on New Year's Eve. It sounds like Colts owner Jim Irsay wants Anthony Richardson to learn while playing, not watching from the bench. Irsay says, quote, "We know it's going to be tough, but he has to play to get better." Irsay added that it's head coach Shane Steichen's call when that happens. And Texans rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud recently got together with teammates for a throwing session at the University of Houston so they can, quote, "get to training camp and dominate." This has been NFL Network Now on the Westwood One Radio Network.
It's your last chance to shop July 4th savings at Lowe's. Right now, save on select major appliances. And when you buy more, you save more. Get up to an additional $1,000 off select major kitchen appliances. Plus, right now when you buy a Craftsman V20 string trimmer or blower for just $99, you'll get a select Bear tool free. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows home improvement. Offers valid through 7/12. Appliance savings vary based on purchase amount. Buy more, save more. Valid on appliances $396 or more. While supplies last. Exclusions apply. See Lowe's.com for details.
Right now at Wendy's, when you buy either a Dave's single, spicy chicken sandwich, medium frosty, or 10-piece nuggets, you can get another for just $1. Your dollar never tasted so good. So it's obvious what everyone will get, right?
Definitely nuts.
Spicy
and
chicken
a
sandwich,
Dave's single and a frosty for me.
And a frosty. Okay, who said frosty and a frosty? Pick your obvious choice. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's. Buy one, get one for $1.
Limited time only. Price participation may vary. U.S. Wendy's valid for item of equal or lesser value. Cannot be combined in a combo or any other offer.
Zach Gelb is on CBS Sports Radio.
So if I'm the Angels, yeah, it's unexpected that you guys are 44-37. It's unexpected that now you guys have a shot to make the postseason, and Ohtani puts butts in the seats, and he draws people to the television sets. Unless he tells you, guys, I'm definitely not going to resign, and I don't think he's going to communicate that from now until the trade deadline. I'm not trading him.
Zach Gilk, weekday afternoons starting at 5 on 97.5 and 1240 KFH. The most listened to sports radio in Wichita is 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Hour number 2 of Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you on the Tuesday edition, Tuesday of the All-Star Game, day after the Home Run Derby. Reacting to that, if you'd like to continue to do that, you can always jump in on the IHOP hotline, which is wide open today, 869-1240. On the hotline tomorrow, we'll have Ross Tucker in to talk, NFL analyst here with us, the Odyssey family. We'll talk a little pre-training camp. He's a great personality. Looking forward to that. Thursday, we'll have some betting, some K-State talk. Lots of good stuff coming up this week. Tommy, as we make our way through, by the way, congratulations to Adam for winning HTO. We appreciate you listening and love giving stuff away. We'll have a Wind Surge giveaway later in this hour. We've been talking about the Home Run Derby and the Pat Fitzgerald situation. More on Fitzgerald's future in a minute, but let's get caught up on Bob Huggins here, Tommy, because another sort of development yesterday in that Huggins is doubling down on his efforts to basically say, I didn't resign. Now, we've all seen the Seinfeld memes rehashed the same thing with San Diego State, right? You quit, and then you don't quit, and then you say that it wasn't you, but your wife that sent it, and you had a team meeting, but the team meeting was only if I'm not back. You wanted to take care of his players, which I actually think there may be some truth to that. But he's really going to try legally here to say he should still be the coach at West Virginia. Tommy, I don't think this one's like a money play. I think he really doesn't want us to walk away from coaching. And he's at his alma mater, and I think he wants to be there. There's like no chance that happens. So I don't know what the end game result for Bob Huggins is here. I think he's mad. And, this is all self-inflicted, of course, because this all happened because of a DUI after a really stupid decision on a radio show he made earlier this offseason. But he still got it, right? They had one of the best transfer classes. They were expected to be pretty good this year. And I think he's angry, and I think he wants to still be the coach. There's about a 0% chance that happens, and that's the latest here.
What does he think the end game is going to be here? They're not giving him his job back. The university, if Huggins has doubled down, then the university has tripled down. Like, they're not giving him his job back. I read Huggins' statement that came out last night where, he talked about what his intentions were and all of that. Then I read the letter from Bob Huggins' attorney to the university and the letter that the general counsel from West Virginia sent back to the attorney. The bottom line is that Bob Huggins will not be the coach at West Virginia, and it's not going to happen. There is like a 0% chance. I don't even know if the longest odds that you could place on this, if I would even take that bet that Bob Huggins would be back, because this is not happening. This is going to be fought over in a courtroom. But even then, I can't imagine that there is any sort of outcome, even in a courtroom, where a judge would say, West Virginia, reinstate Bob Huggins. It's just not going to happen.
He's setting himself up legally here. Like he's dotting all his I's and crossing all his T's, and there was no signature on that letter, and I couldn't respond because I was in rehab. And, I don't know how you meet with the team in rehab, but you can't respond to that. We'll see what leverage he can create legally, because I don't know. What I do think right now, and let's start with Huggins on the future aspect of these two coaches. I don't think, Tommy, we've seen Bob Huggins coach his last game. He's 69 years old. He is still clearly competitive in this environment. I think that when we think about and think back to all the things that coaches have done, but been rehired because they can win, I think when they stack up, if he truly goes through the rehab process and truly gets a handle on the things that are spurring bad decisions, which is something we all hope for, right? I think he's going to coach again. I don't think it'll be at West Virginia, but I think it will be somewhere. And I think it will be somewhere big, pretty soon, actually, because the clock is sort of ticking. But as this thing plays out, unless they come to some settlement that part of the agreement is that you cannot coach, sort of like Wichita State paying Greg Marshall right now. Well, he can't really coach to get that full pay unless they come to something like that. I think he's going to coach again. And I think it will be sooner rather than later. And I think it'll be at a pretty big time program.
I don't agree with that. I think he will coach again. That wouldn't surprise me. I'm not sure he's going to a big time program, even if he goes through the rehab process, because I'm not sure that there's going to be a high profile program out there that's going to be willing to take him on, because there's a lot of risk there with Bob Huggins. He can win, but there is some risk there. This reminds me a little bit of the Billy Gillispie situation, where he was what, at Kentucky for a minute, was it Texas A&M, was it a couple different places, and he's coaching now, but he's not coaching at a high profile program because there's a risk there, and there are issues, and Gillespie, I think, had DUI issues and things like that too, and I think by all accounts could be a difficult person to work for, play for, all of that. So he's coaching. He's not coaching at a high profile program anymore. So that wouldn't surprise me to see, Bob Huggins go to, I don't know. I'm thinking of a program that's like a mid-major type program. I don't know. I don't know exactly the name, like what program it would be. I just have a hard time seeing him in like a group of 5 school, like giving him another chance at the age of 69 with the red flags, with the baggage, with the skeletons that Huggins has.
Who had more baggage and skeletons, Bobby Knight or Bob Huggins?
Bobby Knight did for sure, but
and
that also
Texas Tech.
But remember, that was 20 years ago. Like, it's a different world now, than it was when because keep in mind, like, Bobby Knight left Indiana, and there was, I think that he was still, even for the most part, nationally still revered. And it wasn't until much later that you started, like, looking back at Bobby Knight in retrospect. I think a lot of folks are like, oh my God, like, he was a maniac, and we can't believe we let him off the hook for so many years. So I think things are a little bit different now than they were when Bobby Knight resurfaced at Texas Tech.
I'm going to give you the example that might change your mind. How long did Chris Beard sit out?
You're completely right. Yeah, I get it, but remember,
Ole Miss.
But remember, the charges were dropped, against Chris Beard, where
the charges
he's still dealing.
Well, I don't want to compare.
Bob Huggins is still dealing with
Chris Beard, and the charge was more violent and intentional. It was dropped. It was.
Yep.
I cannot imagine, and I'm not. This is an observation, not like an endorsement. So please don't misunderstand. But I cannot imagine a big-time program in a big-time conference that has struggled, realizes, what's potentially earned by taking a risk with Bob Huggins, who said something stupid and got a DUI. And has at that point, I will assume, rehabbed, right?
And has had other
program.
DUIs in the past as well.
Again, I'm going to assume for the sake of this, that rehab goes well, right? Because if that's going to obviously be a part of any, condition. So I'm assuming that will happen. And I hope that happens for him personally. But I'm going to assume that it does, because I think it probably will. In that scenario, it won't, as long as there's not some like settlement with West Virginia, what is this? What are we coming up on? 2023? By not this season, but the next, Bob Huggins would be coaching at a Power 5 school.
I think I would take that bet because I'm not sure that he will.
I'm going to give you another example. Mike Leach. Think about what he was accused of.
Sure.
And ended up at Washington State.
Was any of that substantiated though? I mean, like that's
well, they fired him for it. They fired him.
They sure did. They sure did. But was any of it substantiated? And that goes back to the Chris Beard situation, right? Like that was and I'm not trying to minimize or downplay the situation with Chris Beard because it was horrific and we discussed it at length on the show. But that was the first offense, I guess. Like there's never been anything else with Chris Beard that's ever come up. Bob Huggins has now a pattern. Like there is a pattern of issues, a pattern of DUIs. And then you add in, what he was saying on the radio. And I don't know. And I'm just speculating here. No clue. But if Bob Huggins has a drinking problem, which he's going to rehab for, it makes me wonder, did that come into play when he was on the radio? Was that part of it? I don't know. And there's no way to tell that. But the words that he used when he was on that radio show makes me wonder a little bit. So there's clearly a pattern there. And I think that, school administrators, athletic directors in 2023 are in a position now, and it's been this way for the last several years, where you have to approach things, I think, with a little bit of caution, especially with someone that has a consistent pattern of red flags like Bob Huggins does. Bob Huggins was fired from Cincinnati for a DUI. Bob Huggins was fired from West Virginia for a DUI. So if you're another program, a high profile one that wants to bring him on, I guess my thought would be do so at your own risk, because there's a pattern now, where like the Mike Leach situation there were rumors and things like that. The same thing happened with Mark Mangino at KU. Like there were rumors that were never substantiated. He lost his job. Chris Beard, like the charges were dropped. He lost his job. This is a little bit different because there's a pattern of offenses here from Bob Huggins.
But there's a correctable in theory if you're the hiring party.
In theory.
So if he goes through a rehab process and a certifiable rehab facility has signed off on that process and there are checks and balances in place, I just think that Rick Pitino had scandal every daggum place he ended up, and he kept, stumbling upward, right? Bobby Petrino, I'm trying to think, Urban Meyer. You don't think every program in the country would hire Urban Meyer right now? Because they would.
I don't think so.
In college, of course they would.
I don't think so.
It's just like, and they had, right? He sort of left scandal everywhere he went, by the way, and just needed to retire about 16 times. But it's just like this happens all the time. And when I think about like the history of the industry and things people have done to be quickly forgiven because they're great at what they do, Bob Huggins to me fits that profile because it's correctable. It's correctable and it's trackable, right? And he's mad right now. And clearly, I think what I read into all of this is that he does not want to be done coaching. And he may coach for spite now, right? Like, again, unless there's some settlement here, when it comes to the open market and some program, I'm trying to think of an example of a program here. Like who is struggle? Let's say it's, I don't know, Florida. I mean, I don't even have a good example.
Rutgers or Vanderbilt or something like that.
Some, but not Vanderbilt probably, but some program, right? That just like, we got to win. They would hire Bob Huggins in a second. They would hire him in a second because he can still get it done. And he's proven that. He went to West Virginia and has been really successful there. And it's coming. It's coming unless there's a settlement. I'm assuming a successful rehab here. That has to be a part of this, and I think it will be. I'm hopeful that it will be for him personally, because I hope everybody is able to make it through those sorts of obstacles. But this one, for all the things that schools have justified over the years in hiring a coach, this one seems far simpler to me, right? Like he made two terrible mistakes, but he has corrected them, and we really need to win basketball games. Right? Because there's a lot of money at stake here. And yeah, they'll hire him. I mean, they will. I'm telling you, they will. We'll see. If he's rehabbed and there's no settlement at West Virginia, he's going to be coaching. I just like and that's what I take away. And I guess the reason this came up for me is that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, and you brought it up right out the top here. Like, what's the reason for all this for Bob Huggins? I think that's the reason, Tommy. I think he still wants to coach. And I think he's trying to plant that seed now to be able to do that as soon as he possibly can.
I mean, for every, Chris Beard or Bobby Knight or, whatever example that you throw out there, Rick Pitino, I just point back to Billy Gillespie, which again is probably the most similar situation, I think.
Yeah, but the reasons they fired him were philosophical. If you, I
not
look
true.
back as
no,
you
that's
brought
not
his
true.
name
There
up.
were that's not. I mean, he was let go from Texas Tech due to allegations of player mistreatment. In the same way that we talked about some of these other coaches. He was arrested for a DUI in Kentucky while he was the coach of the Wildcats. There were contract disputes and things like that. But I think by all accounts was, I think people discussed difficult to work with and work for and all of that. And he had some high profile jobs. He's now the head coach at Tarleton State. I see, in my opinion, I could be totally wrong. There could be a desperate enough Power 5 basketball school that would want to bring in Bob Huggins. I see a school like the profile of Tarleton State as the future of coaching for Bob Huggins if he decides that he wants to get back into it. That's just, I mean, and maybe that won't be, but that's kind of what I see the path being.
So Gillespie's, reason for being fired, according to athletic director Mitch Barnhart at the time, was, quote, not a good fit. I mean, this one with Huggins, the firing is far more interesting because they didn't fire him, right? He resigned, which is the point of contention here.
Right.
They didn't even fire him. He resigned. Right. And he's saying he didn't resign. I just think it's pretty, like, if you're a desperate program and you're an athletic director and this guy's rehab, that's a pretty easy sell to the fan base. And by the way, like, I don't know who else is in West Virginia. I mean, maybe it's a group of 5 school that's closer to home. Like, what's in West Virginia? Is Marshall in West Virginia, right? I think, like, I don't know. But I think that there will be a team desperate enough. If Ole Miss will hire Chris Beard 1 year after all this, because Texas straight fired him, right? They didn't care. They were like, nope, you're out. See you later. Ole Miss was like, all right, come on in, because we know you'll win basketball games. I just feel like in the, it's like in the Big Ten or the SEC or some program that can just throw a bag of money there for somebody to stabilize that program. Bob Huggins fits that profile. And I think it's going to happen. Again, if he rehabs, I'm not, if he continues to spiral downward in his personal life, none of this is going to happen. But he's 69. I mean, let's say he does, Tommy. Let's say he rehabs, everything's good, he's clear at West Virginia, whatever. At 69 years old, and it would be 70, I suppose, at that point. How many good years of coaching could Bob Huggins still have? Because I think it's at least 3, 4, 5. I mean, he's still getting it done.
I think a handful. And I think that's really where, if it is going to be a major D1 school, you're looking at a school that is in need of a major turnaround and a quick turnaround in the world of the transfer portal with a high profile coach. So I do understand that thought process. And if it happens, it happens. I don't know if I would be agreeable to that, but it could happen. I just see, and by the way, you mentioned Rick Pitino falling upwards, every single time something happened. And I don't know if that's totally true because he was at Iona for a few years, so it's not like he was consistently failing upwards, with scandal after scandal. After the Louisville situation, I mean, he was basically persona non grata in college basketball for a while. So, and he's kind of gone through a little bit of a rehabilitation process for his coaching anyway. So I think that I don't know if that's the best example really either in comparing the Bob Huggins situation. If it were me, and this is just my hope for Bob Huggins, he's 69 years old. He has a long, storied history of coaching in college basketball. He's a Naismith Hall of Famer. Focus on your personal life, get healthy for your family, and ride off into the sunset. Like, this is disappointing to me that this is going on because I've always liked Bob Huggins. I've always liked his character. I've liked my teams competing against West Virginia. This, to me, and I don't know if this will be his legacy, overall forever, but at least for me, this is kind of tarnishing it a little bit. This entire situation over the last few months to now, I'm kind of like, Bob, just get healthy and move on.
Yeah, it's again, that's what I hope too. Great personality, entertaining for sure. I don't know. We'll see. Let's hope he gets to the rehab, but this is a messy situation at West Virginia. Pat Fitzgerald, we'll talk about that. And Tommy, I'm going to need you to put on your social media skills here and find out what in the world is happening right now with Kadarius Toney, because something's happening and I can't quite figure it out. So if you could figure that out, I think we probably need to talk about it, because
I'll do what I can.
I'm having a hard time understanding what I'm looking at and trying to see here. So we'll put Tommy on that. We'll see what's going on with Kadarius Toney. We'll talk about Pat Fitzgerald's future as well. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline's open if you want to weigh in. I know there's a lot of people that watch Bob Huggins for a long time that might have some thoughts there. We'll give away some Wind Surge tickets. In fact, let's do that here, Jad. Let's give away a 4-pack of Wind Surge vouchers. Again, we say this. Cool thing about the vouchers is you pick the game. All right, we'll give you the vouchers. You pick the game. Go courtesy of us here at Sports Daily and KFH. We'll be right back with more Sports Daily.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily, Albracht and Castor here on a Tuesday. I sent Tommy on a mission to find out what was going on with Kadarius Toney right now. I feel like it's probably a Twitter thing. I can't keep up with it. I'm not good enough at it. Tommy, what'd you find out?
So I actually had to mute my microphone because I was really worried that it was going to come across and that would be really bad. So I listened to what's going on. Okay, so Kadarius Toney was direct messaged on, I think, Twitter or Instagram, one of those platforms, by a Giants fan who said that Daniel Jones, that Kadarius Toney misses Daniel Jones. That was the gist of the message that the fans sent. These guys are getting messages all the time from fans and people in the public, and you got to keep your mouth shut. Kadarius Toney did not only did he didn't even type anything back. He sent a voice memo to this fan filled with profanity, basically just saying, and I can't even quote it, but just, that Daniel Jones misses him more than he misses Daniel Jones, whatever. It's really stupid. It's just the fact that Toney decided that he wanted to send an actual voice memo to respond to this fan filled with profanity. That's the story. That's the gist of it. That's what's going on.
Oh, yeah, I don't really care about that. Young player acts dumb on social media. That's not a headline to me. I don't care. Behave yourself. If I would advise, if you're smart, to get the hell off of social media. If you need to engage with fans that talk trash to you, and I'm not. Look, it's hard. This is one of the reasons why I generally steer clear of it. It's hard when people are saying something that they would never say to your face, not to respond. But the best answer is always not to respond. Anyway, so that's not that. Okay, that makes me feel better because I was afraid it was something far worse than that.
No, that's what's going on.
Okay, don't care. I do care about this, though. I guess that Jeff Darlington, and I did not see his report, but I saw Trey Wingo, friend of the program, react to the report on that. Basically, the Chris Jones deal is getting close. Now, Wingo then connected the dots we've been connecting for a long time. I said from the beginning, my gut said DeAndre Hopkins was going to be a Chief. And then it was like, well, I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done. I think that that's still the case, Tommy. I think that the Chris Jones deal gets done, they free up the money, and DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a Chief. And the biggest reason why is DeAndre Hopkins hasn't signed anywhere yet. He's been waiting for the Chiefs, I feel like, the whole time. There's mutual interest. They were the betting favorite to land him before he was ever put on the trade block. It's always made sense for both parties, right? The Chiefs could use him greatly. And if he wants to extend his career, going to Kansas City, of course, makes the most sense. And if they can find a way to free up the money on a short-term deal, which a Chris Jones extension, which they want to do anyway, does, bingo. It's like a duh kind of thing. It was just like, can he afford to wait for the Chris Jones deal? Well, if Darlington's reporting that that's coming closer now, Tommy, I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think D-Hop's going to be a Chief. And again, it makes all the sense in the world.
It sounds like that Hopkins had really productive meetings with the Patriots and the Titans. And I think I read that both of those teams have made him offers. And he's not signed with either one of them. And the reporting has been very vague about Hopkins waiting around, waiting for some, quote, mystery team. It's clearly the Chiefs. I remember a few months ago, there was that interview that he did where the reporter was asking him what team he wanted to land with. And, he didn't say anything. He just kind of gave facial expressions and that. And you could tell during that entire thing, he wanted to be in Kansas City. Why wouldn't you? You can be a clear number one wide receiver. They don't have a clear-cut number one wide receiver in that room right now. They've got a bunch of number 2 and number 3 receivers in that room. You get to play with Patrick Mahomes. You get to play with Travis Kelce. You've got a great offensive unit, offensive line. Really, this is a piece that makes a ton of sense. And my feeling on it was, if it happened, great. I didn't want the Chiefs to overspend for DeAndre Hopkins. I didn't think a trade with Arizona made any sense because you were going to be giving up assets to get him. I never was really in favor of that. But if the price is right, if they can free up the cap space, get Chris Jones done and extended long term, and bring in Hopkins, that's a win-win. I don't know. I can't imagine anybody would be negative on that.
No, and I don't care about the money either, because I think no matter what, it's going to be a one-year deal. If they want to give him 1 year and $30 million, I don't care, because it's a one-year deal, right? Their team is set. It's not like they need that money. You know, I would like to see them get a little bit more depth in the backfield, because I'm afraid of Isaiah Pacheco's running style and his ability to hold up for an entire season. But they do.
Hey, how about the
still
conversations about, having Hopkins and Dalvin Cook teaming up? Could Dalvin Cook be a Chief too?
I don't think they can afford them both, unfortunately. But I wonder if they could afford Zeke Elliott. Maybe not. I don't know. It just has always made sense. I think that there is a bigger need at what Hopkins will have a bigger impact on the team. I don't think there's much question about that, because I think any depth in the backfield you bring in is just that, depth in the backfield. Hopkins isn't a depth piece. Hopkins is an offensive changing piece that allows Kadarius Toney insurance, number one, which is smart. Sky Moore the ability to develop, and Rashee Rice the ability to develop. I mean, imagine those receiver sets. You still have Marquez Valdez-Scantling to mix in to spread the field. You have those young guys to gadget play all over the place. It makes a ton of sense. And
there's got to be the one thing I want to point out. There's got to be an odd man out in that wide receiver room if Hopkins comes in. So is that
MVS.
Richie James?
Richie James is toast at that point. Yeah. But it's MVS. I think as far as the guys who are expected to contribute, or it's allowing for, slower development for somebody like Rashee Rice. And that's totally possible too. And then maybe MVS, because I think MVS's ability to spread the field is always a threat and will always make the Chiefs more dangerous. But if push comes to shove, I imagine this offense with D-Hop on one side, basically three guys in Toney, Sky Moore, and Rashee Rice moving all over the field with Travis Kelce. I mean, maybe they don't need the backfield depth because they're going to run it like 5 times a game in that scenario, right? Like they're never going to run the ball unless
keep
they're
in mind,
just
I mean,
killing somebody.
They've got Pacheco and McKinnon both coming back, and by the way, Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be healthy.
They have the same backfield essentially they had a year ago, which is okay. My only thing on the backfield is I'm a little concerned. Again, Isaiah Pacheco, we love to watch him play football because he runs violently. Violent runners don't last very long in the NFL. They just don't. I mean, his history tells us that. So I have some concern there, but not that much of a concern. If they get DeAndre Hopkins, which I mean, I'll stick with my initial gut reaction. I think they're going to. They don't. I mean, that's one scenario, and I'm a run the ball kind of person still. I think it still has value, but at that point, you're running the ball with those gadget players. There's so many screen opportunities, and it'd just be insane imagining Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes with that sort of versatility. It takes some pressure off Travis Kelce, which is probably also a smart thing to do, right? Like limiting contact for Kelce is not a bad thing as he gets older, but I think it's going to happen. So here's something that I heard as I was listening. So I'm at the time of the year. Usually it's July 4th. After July 4th, Tommy, I'd spend a lot of time studying and like getting ready for fantasy football. I think a lot of people do, but I do. And it's John Hansen, who's been around forever. He's the guru. He's been around. He has a podcast. So I listen to him quite a bit. And he pointed out something that was interesting to me. Like, what if Steph Diggs had his little spat so that he made sure the Bills, like, what if the disagreement was to make sure the Bills didn't go sign DeAndre Hopkins? Because that would impact Steph Diggs, and like could so totally see that being something Steph Diggs would do. I thought that was really interesting when I heard that, and it was kind of tongue in cheek, but kind of like, yeah, I could see it, and I was kind of like, yeah, I could see that. Like it's just a reminder of how fortunate Chiefs fans are. Like everybody in the entire Chiefs organization, I would imagine, I don't know a lot about Kadarius Toney at this point, but I think just about everybody would be excited to bring him in, including Travis Kelce, who he would certainly take production away from, I think, if he came in there. Like everybody would be on board with it. In fact, Patrick Mahomes would probably be like, you know what? Don't worry about my deal right now. Let's bring in D-Hop. Let's do that. We'll get my deal done later. That's reality on this team. And it is so unusual and so refreshing. And like Chiefs fans just like, God, I hope everybody appreciates how unique that culture is right now, because you just never get it. You never get it. They let Tyreek Hill walk. Like, all right, well, if it's all about the money, man, like good on you. Tyrann Mathieu. The players that come in where it's all about the money, it's kind of like, okay, go make it somewhere else, because it ain't hit here. Like we're all in to win it, baby. Like that's all we care about.
We're going to win championships. We're going to keep that dynasty going. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because they still don't have the Chris Jones deal done.
I know.
That being said, I'm trending, and especially with that Jeff Darlington report just a little bit ago, I'm trending more, comfortable and calm about this than I was maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I really, for a minute, was pretty concerned that there wasn't going to be a long-term deal done with Chris Jones, and that was going to be hanging over the head of the organization, over the course of the season. So again, we're inching closer to training camp. Freeing up that cap space is going to be essential, and you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're extending Chris Jones. That foundational piece continues on your team. You're basically ensuring, more than likely, he's going to be a Chief his entire career, and it gives you flexibility to be able to go out and get other things done.
It just makes, if we just take 1 second to read between the lines, right? Like, it's like this has been building the entire time. D-Hop clearly wants to go to Kansas City, and I think they'd love to have him. They just haven't been able to. But as they come down to the finish line on the Chris Jones deal, which, by the way, Chris Jones needs to be paid this way because what he's done is historic in nature. Like, the pressure he puts on the quarterback from the position that he plays, I don't know if he's like the total disruptor of Aaron Donald, who's probably in the conversation for greatest football player we've ever seen, right? Like, he grades out that way. But just like, because you have to sort of remove that a little bit in fairness. Chris Jones is as good a pass rusher at the position he plays, honestly, as really anybody we've ever seen in the sport. And if quarterbacks have the most value in football, we know this, right? Defending the quarterback has the second most value in football, and that we see it all the time. And, I don't have any problem with Jones sort of commanding this market that, probably is normally reserved for defensive ends or whatever, because that's the kind of impact he has on the game. And he's, one of one in what he does. Aaron Donald is a little bit different of a player and disrupts everything and is just this monster freak, whatever. Chris Jones is a little different than that, but he's absolutely a part of what they get done. And every time I hear this, it looks like it's getting done, that makes me feel better. I don't want this contention, there among those two parties. And I don't think it's there, but every once in a while, you're kind of like, is Chris Jones annoyed by this? Like, I don't know, but it sounds like they're getting close.
I've said this all along, and I believe it more now today than I did the first time I ever said it. I wholeheartedly believe that Chris Jones is more important to the Chiefs than Aaron Donald is to the Rams. It doesn't mean that Aaron Donald isn't as good of a player. I mean, I think Aaron Donald, as an individual performer, we know the freak ability that he is. But what Chris Jones, the role that he fills in that defense for Kansas City as the leader of the defense, just the versatility, the way that he's built, the position that he plays, the way that he gets to the quarterback, all of that, I think he is more important to the overall success of that defense, and then by extension, the overall success of the team, than Aaron Donald is for the Rams.
I agree, because I think that there are more players dependent on his success defensively for the Chiefs than there are for the Rams, who have
for sure
invested a lot of money and everything into the players on that defense. But
and Aaron Donald is an amazing individual performer, but I'm not sure that the importance of him on that team quite matches where Chris Jones
I think
is.
to the other players. I think to the
Yeah.
other players on the defense. I agree with that because I think the Chiefs probably aren't quite as talented. At least, and I haven't studied the Rams defense this year. I don't know how much they've lost, but in years past, that talent to talent, the Rams had as much talent on the roster defensively as any team. The Chiefs are still developing a lot of that talent, but just like how important is it for George Karlaftis that Chris Jones is good? How important is it for those young corners that they've invested all these resources in that Chris Jones is good and doesn't make them have to defend the pass for as long as they might would he not be there? I agree with that. All right. Lot there. Let's come back. We'll go back to this coaching stuff. What about Pat Fitzgerald? How long is he going to be out of the game? We'll talk about it next on Sports Day. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Jet Chambers producing for us. Congratulations to Wendell for winning our Win Surge vouchers. We've given away some Win Surge vouchers. We've given away some movie tickets to the new Mission Impossible. We've given away some iced tea to HTO. Lots of giveaways this time of year. We're happy to do that. We'll continue that throughout the weeks here as we make our way toward the fall. All right, back to Pat Fitzgerald, Tom. We set up the situation. He's been fired by Northwestern. It's going to be a legal mess. He's lawyered up with some high-profile lawyers. He's probably going to get some money. I don't know what that will do to impact his coaching future. If he's free and clear to coach again, Tommy, how soon do you think Pat Fitzgerald will lead a major college program or land a high-profile NFL job? Because I think it will be in 2024.
And I think it'll be more than likely NFL. It wouldn't surprise me to see him as a coordinator in the NFL right away. And that's kind of been the path, I feel like, for college coaches that, maybe were let go under some not great circumstances or whatever. A lot of times you'll see them resurface as a coordinator in the NFL. That wouldn't surprise me. I think 2024 is probably on the table. I mean, where everybody is at in the cycle right now in the offseason for college football and the NFL, I'm not sure there's going to be anything super appealing available for him this coming season, but I do think we'll see him again in 2024.
If there are teams willing to turn a blind eye for basketball coaches in the sense of Bob Huggins, they're even more prone to do it for a football coach. There is the appropriate, I think, and I say appropriate, like appropriate to him coaching soon, amount of pushback from his players, from him, to his role in this heinous situation, that I think it is setting him up to be able to sort of not have this hold him back at the next stop. And I think an NFL coordinator is more likely, probably. I don't think he's on the radar as an NFL head coach anymore anyway, like he was at one point, despite, all these things happening. But I do think, man, with the money on the line now, there would be, again, a Power 5 program that would be willing to hire him. I really do. With his track record outside of this situation, which again is going to get a massive pushback from him, from his players, from whatever else. I think that it's setting the table again for him to coach right away. And, it is what it is. It's the industry that is. But I do agree. I think NFL coordinator is probably more likely because that does allow him to sort of step away and let things settle down a little bit. Such a
and keep in mind too,
scenario. God,
keep in mind too, as a coordinator in the NFL, he's not going to be entrusted with a locker room of college athletes and, sort of this culture that I think happens, from time to time on college universities of hazing. And like we've heard that, forever. I mean, for 20, 30 years about fraternity and sorority hazings and things like that. Like that just sort of has permeated college over the last,
Tommy,
20,
I've heard
30,
of
40 years
band
forever,
hazing,
right?
Right.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's
so
anywhere there's a group of older people interacting with younger people.
So Fitzgerald can completely remove himself from that culture and be at the pro ranks, where at that point, like, I don't think that, like, I feel like it can be an easier putt for an NFL team to say, hey, we're bringing on Pat Fitzgerald as our coordinator,
The NFL
as opposed to
doesn't
going,
care.
I know, I'm just saying, like, from an optics point of view, it's going to probably be better for him to be a coordinator in the NFL than it would be. Because then, like, if there's another Power 5 school that hires him as a head coach, then they're going to be subject to the questions about what happened at Northwestern, right? Like,
they'll be subject to the questions for about 2 weeks, and then everybody will just want to know if they're going to win football games. The NFL, let's be clear, does not care, would not care, would not bat an eye. The hazing that goes on in the NFL that you hear about is a rookie having to pick up a dinner tab, right? Like, more acceptable and appropriate, ribbing of, rite of passage type things, because you've got adults. That's why, typically this doesn't happen with adults, because the societal pressure goes down as you get older. Most of us develop this, I don't really care what other people think, right? Like, I don't need, that I've got enough things going on in my life that, I'll gravitate to the people that like me for who I am. But that takes a long time. That's why we see this in young people. And it's not just sports. It's everywhere. On college campuses, on high school campuses. It's for whatever reason, we're idiots sometimes, again, when we're younger. And I just think that the plate is being set by Fitzgerald's team. He's going to try to, get what he thinks he's earned financially back out of Northwestern. But I think there's also some of it that is a look to protect his future. I really do think, and it's the same thing for Huggins. Like, I think the reason you're seeing such public pushback from those two guys is because they have no intentions of being done coaching. You sometimes don't see that pushback, and people are perfectly willing and content with riding off to the sunset with a bag of money. I mean, that happens all the time too. So I think it is important that we're seeing such public pushback from these two coaches, because the way I read it is they don't want to be done coaching. Like, they want to coach like right now. And it's not obviously not going to happen either place, despite what Huggins says, but it'll be somewhere else, I think, for both of them. And I think it's going to happen soon. 869-1240. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network. It'll be a slower week, a more regular programming type of week here as we make our way through the Major League Baseball All-Star break. But we'll do that next. Sports Daily, wrapping up a Tuesday right after this.
At Fisher Investments, our clients know we have their backs.
All right, that's it for us, everybody. Glad to be with you today. We'll react to the All-Star game tomorrow as we reacted to the Home Run Derby today. If you missed any of that conversation, you can go back and listen, as always, for free on the Odyssey app. Thanks for joining us on the video stream, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Here on KFH the rest of the way, you've got Jim Rome right after us, Bob and Jeff from 2 to 4, Maggie and Perloff for an hour, Zach Gelb takes over at 5, JR Sport Brief after that, regular programming here today on KFH. Tommy, enjoy the All-Star game tonight. The Rangers versus Braves All-Star game.
Let's go Braves. Let's go National League. I'm a National League guy, so I'm on board with that. Looking forward to recapping it tomorrow.
Get out of here with that National League guy. IHOP Hotline will be open for you tomorrow. Ross Tucker coming up on the show tomorrow. For Tommy, I'm Jacob.
Sports,
Jazz.
news, and great comedy with Bob and Tom mornings, 97.5 and 12.